Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Words of perception.
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
All right, well, take fucking 4. Take 4, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the show, and you're probably wondering, well, what do you mean, take 4? What do you mean, take fucking 4? And what the hell kind of a way to start a show is that, Mr. Mike Brancatelli? Well, that is me. This is Mikeadelic. Hi, hello, how are you? I missed all of you, beautiful, wonderful people. It's been a while. And what I meant by that is this is the 4th time now that I'm recording a solo show. And this is really, really rare. So, by the way, this is going to be a solo cast, solo episode. It's just going to be me. And if you're familiar with the show, I put out lots of solo shows where it's just me ranting and raving about whatever's going on. And I've now tried to record myself 4 times. 3 times. This is the 4th time. Hopefully, I'm not going to delete this one and we can put this one out. I'm really feeling really scattered, shattered, and just off. You know, I think being away for so long, living in the Amazon jungle and being outside of America, being disconnected and not recording solo episodes, it feels a little rough to try to hop back in. I mean, I was putting out an episode a week, sometimes bonus episodes, and when I was away for 3 months, I only put out I think 3 episodes. Yeah, and I gotta say again, thank you so much to everybody who sticks around. I mean, I know sometimes it can be annoying because especially the supporting listeners, you're probably like, well, you were expecting new episodes and this and that, but yeah, I don't know. It's I guess it's been pretty rough. I mean, there's definitely a serious integration period that has to happen in terms of kind of like reacclimating to the environment of the Western world and coming back after living in a tribal sort of community of in the Amazon jungle in Peru, and being there for such a long period of time, just to then hop back into this sort of plugged in digital matrix world. It's been difficult for me, and I think that I think I've had some hesitations. I recorded a couple episodes, and I didn't feel confident in them. Number one, I was smuttering and pattering and spattering around like some freaking idiot, and this is very not natural to me. I feel a little off. And so apologies in advance if this episode is off or whatever, but I don't feel like I'm really connecting this sort of like frequency of flow that sometimes I would be able to get into. And I think a lot to do with that is that like the sort of palpable rage that had been fermenting at the top of my mind almost on a 24/7 basis from being plugged into this world that I've been living in here in America is not really there anymore. So it's like, hey, thanks ayahuasca for making me more centered and more calm and more rational and reasonable and peaceful. But I'm not like fomenting with rage. I'm not like seething with an undercurrent of rage against the crony corporate plutocratic warmongering rapist state. Of course, I still feel the same way. I still have sort of, the same sort of ideas about that I talk about on these shows. I haven't really changed my mind about anything, but it's just the added, like, I don't know, the atmosphere or the attitude that I have. I mean, I've been away for such a long period of time. I've gone through so many things, and I feel like I'm learning a lot of new pieces to the puzzle that I want to put together. And one of the things that's really been bothering me has been like this idea of who the fuck am I? Like who am I to talk about these ideas? Who am I to say such things? What authority do I have? What gives me the right to speak in the way that I do about the things that I do, and this is something that goes through my mind, right? I mean, I almost feel like in this world, it's sort of like you have to sort of pick a personality, an image, and go with that. And this could just be a projection of my mind. Who cares? But for example, if you go and check out my YouTube channel, right? I have some comedy videos on there, some videos of doing impressions, and then I have some like really serious videos that are like fucked up and like talking about like really heavy subject matters, like the war and the killing of innocent people and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, who am I? Like, who is Mike Brancatelli? Because when people see me in my regular life, like, for the most part, most people seem to really like me, and I seem to be like a very easygoing, affable, gregarious kind of person. But if you were to read through some of my tweets, or if you were to read through some of my Facebook posts, or if you were to watch some of my YouTube videos, I don't know what kind of impression you would get. Like, maybe it would be something like, well, this guy's a little unhinged, or this guy's a little angry, or this person's like a conspiracy theorist, or this person's like a crazy person or something. And but I guess I'm kind of sort of, what I'm trying to say is I'm sort of wrestling around with this notion of like, what can I do? Can I do all of this stuff? Can I make comedy? Can I talk about serious things? Can I be silly, goofy, and absurd and talk about like really serious matters? Will that like, I don't know, I want to say yes, because that's what I care about. That's what I want to do. But I also feel like this is just shit. This is shit. I'm here, I'm keeping this in. I'm keeping this in. I'm not deleting this, because here I am going off about something that most of you people listening are probably just going to be like, yeah, dude, just do it, man. Just do your thing. And I plan to. I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like I maybe lost a step, or I lost a groove that I was in, and I don't really feel like I'm really hitting it anymore. And you just heard me kind of like stop myself and just criticize myself. And you know what? I could delete this podcast right now and I could start over again, but I'm just not going to do that. I'm not going to do that, because I got to get something out, and I got to really just try and communicate from a place that where I'm at. Like hello everybody. Here I am. This is where I'm at. I'm sorry I'm not polished, Micadelic, flowing with, profound insights or whatever. It's just not happening for me right now. But I do want to talk about what's going on. I do want to talk about my process. I said I was going to do a show that was going to talk about my ayahuasca journey and how it was going to go down there. And I felt a little bit of pressure on myself to do that. I don't know why. I mean, I had this idea of going down there and documenting the trip, and I think it all kind of aligns to I had so much positive feedback from my ayahuasca series, the 4-part series I did about my ayahuasca journey the first time. People said so many good things, and you know what? I felt really good recording that too. So I'm not surprised that people said really good things about that. I felt really good recording that, and I felt like it was appropriate to tell that story in the way that I did in the sort of 4-part episodic adventure. And this time I've been trying to do the same thing, and I'm realizing that I'm trying to recreate something that was just a moment in time and that I can't recreate it again. And I'm kind of forcing myself to fit it in, and it's not going to fit in. It doesn't have to fit in. So, with that being said, as you can tell, this podcast is going to be just kind of a thinking out loud sharecast. Like, I'm just going to be sharing with you people, much in the same way that I would be sharing with people when I was down in Peru. We would have sharing circles, and people would open up about their experiences and what they're going through. And this is what it's going to be for this show. And I'm not going to be telling the ayahuasca story right now. And like I said, it's just not where I'm at right now. And I think it has a large part to do with the fact that, like, I'm still processing so much of this, this mission to space that I went on. And now I'm back on Earth, and I'm like, okay, Stella's got to get her groove back, baby. Mycadelic's got to get his groove and got to get his mojo back. Like, I feel like Austin Powers when he lost his mojo, baby. Mr. Powers, I would like you to die. One of my favorite movies, the original Austin Powers, the first one, not the second or third one. Those were okay, but the first one was just classic satire, spoof of all, like, the Golden Eye and all that kind of stuff. When I was insolent, I was placed in a burlap bag and beaten. Dr. Evil, great character. But yeah, I mean, one of the greatest lines from that movie is when they unfreeze Austin Powers, and he's like, "What? Where am I?" And they're like, "The year is 1997, Austin, and you're in London." And he's like, "Well, as long as people are still having promiscuous sex while experimenting with mind-expanding drugs, I'll be sound as a pound, baby." I always love that line. Great movie, Austin Powers. Check it out, first one, if you haven't seen it. It's pretty funny. So this show, like, right now, like, where I'm at is that I feel maybe stuck or conflicted or unsure of where I want to go with what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling, and I have a lot of things on my mind. I just think that this sort of the coming back. You know what? Maybe I should talk about that. Maybe I should talk about how coming back after being in the environment that I was in. Let me describe to you the environment that I was in first. The environment that I was in for 3 months was one that I was disconnected from the internet. I had zero internet connection, except for when I went to town, which was sometimes once every 3 weeks and sometimes once every 4 or 5 weeks. But I had zero internet connection, and I was living in a wooden hut in the Amazon jungle with a temporary community of guests and a sort of more permanent community of staff people and local people. And the vibe there was very much of one of the what I talk about on this show as being something that is, I think, something that we've lost along our way. And I think a large part of the reason why the psychedelics, that ayahuasca and other psychedelics are making such a big comeback, and people are able to heal from a lot of traumas and things like that, has a large part not to do simply with just the substance, but the community around the substance, the community that gets created of people, and the place where I was a perfect representation of the kind of communities that we should be living in as human beings, and the kind of communities that we're biologically built for, that we've evolved to live in, where we're supporting each other. I mean, this idea that we have here in the West of technological advancement and scientific advancement and even advancement in medicine and, the purification and the sanitation of all this kind of stuff, we think that we're heading to this sort of like clean world of superiority and progress. And it's progress for who, for what? It's like, where are we going? What is it all for, right? And the vibe that I get from being in the Amazon jungle, living in this community space with people, is one where it's like there's no real desire or yearning to be achieving something that is, I don't know, like in some kind of like superior material way. It's where everybody is there supporting each other and helping each other. And the conversations that you get in with people are really deep and everybody's really ripe and open and ready to explore the depths of their own mind and their psyche and their consciousness and their heart and soul, and people are willing to go to places to have these deep talks and these deep conversations. People are willing to lend a hand, and people are there's patience and calmness, and there of course were times where people were not in full alignment with all of those things, but it's just amazing to me that I feel like a foreigner coming back. Like I feel like an alien almost coming back into this environment. There's so much here that is good, right? And I'm not trying to say that the West is a terrible place and we should burn it all down and civilization is like a prison. But then again, maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe we've just constructed a really, really, really nice. Maybe we've just constructed here in America, like, a really very nice, large outdoor prison. I mean, it's not that far-fetched to. Far-fetched. I mean, it's the reality of the truth is what it is, right? I mean, that sort of is the reality of what it is. As soon as you have people who are ruling over you, you're not free. You're not. When you're living in a small tribe, like a band of brothers and sisters who are like-minded individuals that are coming together and voluntarily agreeing upon how things should be with each other, that seems to be the best way for human beings to operate. That seems to be the best way to make sure that everybody's healthy and happy and people don't have anxiety and depression and thoughts of suicide and all this like crazy shit that you feel in the energy, in the air, in the atmosphere. As soon as you land in America, it's like, holy shit, this is the land of anxiety and insecurity and worry and just like hysteria. It's insane. I mean, we have such a massive country. There's so many people here that it's there's so many different perspectives. But the dominant perspective, the dominant paradigm of our current cultural climate in time right now is one of hysteria, panic, depression, suicide, hysteria. It's just not conducive to fostering the best and brightest qualities of what a human being has to offer in this world. And we can do better. We can do better. But we're not. Because we're not paying attention. And I notice myself getting sucked into the social media clusterfuck and the attention-grabbing slot machine, casino, dopamine-releasing apps of social media. So I deleted all of them on my phones. You know, these people are everything nowadays is designed for a few different things. One, to collect your data so they can sell you things and keep you under control. I mean, that's a side effect of it. But mainly just to sell you things. I mean, mainly just to sell you and to sell advertising to you and to place things in front of you that you don't really need but you maybe want. And the time spent on the platforms, you know, the amount of time that's spent on these platforms, Facebook wants to keep you on Facebook. That's why when you post links on Facebook, you should always post them in the comments section if it's a link to another website, which 9 times out of 10 it is. And you'll see when I post this show, I don't post the show. I mean, I do because it automatically goes out from Libsyn, but I actually repost it and I post it in the comments section because Facebook's algorithm is designed to decrease the amount of visibility to links that click off of Facebook. Their job is to keep you on Facebook as long as possible. If you've ever tried to quit Facebook, Facebook says on one of their closing screens, "Are you sure you want to go? Brad and Tom and Jenny are really going to miss you. You're not going to be able to talk to your friends anymore. Are you sure you want to go?" And then you click on there, "Yes, I'm sure. But your niece and nephews have birthdays coming up and they're going to miss you. Don't you want to watch them grow?" I mean, it's sick, the level of manipulation that they go to in order to keep you sucked into their platform. Twitter, Instagram, all these things are designed to release, you know, to give you like dopamine hits. I mean, it's essentially like it's like virtual heroin. And look, these things can be used for good. These things can be used in a positive way. I think the frequency of the use that we've created, where it's just like omnipresent, you know, people used to say, "Well, how many hours do you spend on your phone a day?" I'd be like, "Hours spend phone? What? My phone's, I'm always in my phone. What are you talking about? It's in my hand and I'm on it constantly. Even if I'm talking to somebody else, I'm on my phone." And that's not, I don't like that. I don't get a good feeling from that. I get so since deleting the social media apps on my phone, I have felt profoundly better. So now what I have is I have Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter bookmark in a folder called social media in my drop downs, my bookmarks, and in Chrome, which I'm using a DuckDuckGo plugin because DuckDuckGo is a search engine that prides itself on not tracking you and not selling your data and information. It's encrypted. So, which doesn't really, I mean, like, it's one little effort that I'm doing, but you know, realistically, I mean, there's really no escape from, you know, from the data collectors, you know, from the searchers, from the trackers. Like, I read an article recently that says Facebook tracks you on over 8 million websites with cookies and pixels and all these, you know, tracking pixels and all these things. And, you know, I used to work for a company that did social media marketing where our job was to target people on Facebook to sell them ads. So, you know, I got out of that because I just didn't really feel like it in alignment with how I felt morally about the issue. I don't think that that's contributing to changing society for the better. I don't care if it's a job that's, hey, it pays, it's a gotta make a living, right? I mean, it pays. Find a way to do something else. Find a way. Quit. Do something else. Do something that's contributing to the betterment of the culture in which we live in. So we don't live in a culture of fucking people coming home from work and sitting in front of the couch watching pregnant teen moms or whatever, and whatever the fuck the shows are on now, or whatever's happening. I mean, yeah, these are the people who are responsible for the society in which we live in, and the people that aren't paying attention, the people that are just going along with whatever whatever's handed to them. That's like, oh, that's dumb and entertaining and fun, and we don't have to use a lot of brain cells, and we don't have to exert a lot of energy, and we don't have to think because we're wiped out from working, because we have a job that we have to go to every day, because we have to pay for a car that we don't need, to live in a house that's too big that we don't use. Whatever the case may be. I mean, I love that there's a lot of alternative living lifestyles that are taking off now. I love, like, whatever, like the tiny house or micro house or vagabond, digital nomads, like these types of things, places like couch surfing and stuff like that. I mean, really, I think any effort to bring people together in more of a community environment, even like, when I was down in Peru and we would have nights where we would have ceremonies, sometimes people slept in the maloca. The maloca is like the big circular sort of wooden teepee that we would hold ceremonies in. And sometimes after the ceremonies would end, people would sleep there, and I would sleep there too sometimes. And, there's something nice about sleeping in a room with other people in a communal sort of way. And for a large part of our existence, we have lived in communities like that where people slept together in rooms. People did things together. They knew each other. They were more connected. And the case that I'm making right now is that coming back into this environment, I feel so foreign and disconnected and alien and strange after being in such an open, honest, and loving, sort of compassionate environment where people are facing the deepest, darkest depths of themselves and slaying their dragons and looking at themselves with this bravery and this courage to do deep personal work on themselves so they can heal themselves as individuals and decrease the amount of suffering that they're facing in their life, thus creating a ripple effect that spills outward onto the people that they're surrounded by, decreasing the amount of suffering that they're projecting onto the world and they're experiencing with the people surrounding them, which actually change the fucking world. Like, that's change the world. Changes your world. Changes the way that the society is formed, and the values that we have, and the cultural norms and these sorts of things. I mean, these things don't just change, by themselves. They change because people take initiative to make them change. I just finished reading this great book, Tribe, by Sebastian Junger, and he talks about when there's a decrease in the level of community, what happens is there's an increase in the level of authority. So, when communities are there, people come together for each other. You don't need anybody to intervene with an overarching hierarchical, forceful dictator authority. You just have each other, and you're there for each other. I mean, that's what happens all the time, right? I mean, I was in New York when Hurricane Sandy happened. When that happened, I had no power. I was on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I walked outside. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life in New York City. People were just walking up to each other going, "Hey, are you okay? How are you doing? Do you have power? Is everything all right? Are you okay?" People come together in times of tragedy. People come together in times of great, horrific devastation. I mean, that's why I think if Ronald Reagan ever said anything intelligent, he said it when he gave his speech at the United Nations when he said, I often think that an extraterrestrial attack would bring humanity together, that we would put aside our differences for if UFOs were to make contact. You know, I like, that's what happens in the movie Independence Day, right? Like, that's exactly what happens. The aliens invade Earth, and then the nations all have to come together to fight the common threat. I think that was the atmosphere around right after 9/11. I know for sure I was riled the fuck up after the towers went down. I was a junior in high school when that happened. I remember watching that, like, on television in the morning, and then later finding out that it was also the Pentagon, and then there was another plane, and I mean, it was surreal. It was insane. I couldn't believe, like, everything changed after that. Everything changed. The whole period of time that I grew up, since being born in 1984 to 2001, was a completely, September 11th, 2001, was a completely different time than after September 11th. But there was a great period of time after September 11th, too. And that period of time was when George Bush was standing on the rubble of the World Trade Center, and he was like, and you people hear me now, we're going to get the people responsible for this, and they're going to know what, that we mean business, and they're going to hear us, and we're going to make it happen. And everybody was like coming together, like, yes, like, we're rallying together. We were attacked. Now we're going to go get these people. And, it was a loving coming together experience of people saying, like, hey, like, we're all on the same side now. But then, of course, we decided to invade Iraq, and then there were all the lies about weapons of mass destruction, and then we took Saddam out, and then, there's all the terrorist groups formed, and then it just kept going on and on and on and on and on, and now it's fucking 17 years later. 17 fucking years later since the very beginning of the quote-unquote war on terror. Man, I remember I saw this great quote where someone said, like, well, the war on drugs produces more drug dealers. The war on terror produces more terrorists. I think they said something like, I guess we should have a war on education or something like that, But the coming together in times of tragedy, I mean, that, the government wants you to, like, the government as a system, the way that the system structures is to make sure that it's necessary. It's functioning as a necessary, I mean, essentially it's just an ornament, but it wants to position itself as, well, if you didn't have us, there would be chaos. Total chaos. You people would be eating each other in the streets if it weren't for this government. And that's just not the case. That's just not the case at all. Because they want to keep you dependent upon them. If you're dependent upon the government, then that means that it legitimizes their claim. If there's a threat out there, like this war on terror, if there's terrorists and there's a threat out there, then it legitimizes their claim to use authority to rule over us. If they can divide us and keep us fighting about things like race and gender and, all this other stupid fucking, which is pretty much meaningless shit, if they can keep us a wedge divided amongst us, then that fractures the community. It keeps people isolated. When people are isolated, they're lonely. When people are lonely, they get depressed. When people get depressed, they get prescribed things like mood stabilizers, SSRIs, and medications like Adderall, which is basically meth. And then they go on shooting rampages, and people wonder why. We wonder why. It's because we're disconnected from each other, from the planet, from the cosmos, from the meaning of our lives. There was this great quote in this book that I'm reading by Michael Pollan called How to Change Your Mind, about psychedelics, about potentially finding a cure for depression and anxiety and all those sorts of things. And he talks about Dr. Robin Carhart Harris, who at the Imperial College of London, who was doing the brain imaging scans and on LSD and other things. And one of the things that they found was that there's this network in the brain called the default mode network. It's a critical network, like one of the most critical networks. It's central. It's like the central location. He calls it like the command center, the central hub of brain activity. And he says that what happens is the central hub, the default mode network, actually decreases when you're on a psychedelic. It dissipates, it lessens, which was surprising because they thought that there would be an increase in brain activity. But this particular network kind of like, shut down. And I think that's where when people report like ego deaths or the loss of an ego, because essentially what you have in this network in the brain is the sort of the dictator. This is the dictator of the brain, and what it does is it makes sure everything is in order and functioning and proper. But what happens is when it isn't put into check, when it isn't shut off every now and then and rebooted or like defragged or cleaned like a computer, it runs wild. And it creates too much rigidity and too much order. And when there's too much rigidity and too much order, it actually creates a certain kind of form of chaos, because it's too orderly. It's too structured. It's too rigid. There's not enough wiggle room for improvisation. There's not enough room for curiosity and creativity. It's shut down. It's walled off. It's too rigid. It's too strict. So if that's the case, if psychedelics are able to help people quiet the default mode network of the brain, lessen the ego, and then create more of a looser pattern and a widened perspective of all of those rigid structures that this default mode network creates, then obviously what's going on here is what Graham Hancock says, that because we've severed our connection with altered states of consciousness that produce this lower default mode network that opens us up, that increases our openness and increases our perspective and creates a little bit more chaos to balance out the over rigidity of the order. Because of this, we've essentially run off the track and an insane collision course with insanity. We've created a sort of prison, a prison of our minds that creates these problems, and that prison of our minds then, on a macro level, looks like what we have right now with this current system that we have, this current cultural paradigm that we're living in, which is one that's killing us. It's not so much of we can't just isolate things to saying like, well, psychedelics can help with depression. People suffering from depression. Why are people suffering from depression? Why? People are suffering from depression because human beings are not living in a climate and an environment that is suitable to foster the best conditions that a human being most deeply desires. And what a human being most deeply desires is feeling competent, feeling useful, feeling necessary, feeling like you're contributing, you have a purpose, that you're doing something meaningful and of value, feeling that you're living genuine and authentic, and that you're not faking anything, that you can be who you really are. And feeling connected to other people, like other people understand you, like they know what you're going through, and that you have somebody that you can talk to when you're having a day where you're like, I just don't know, I just don't know about this life, or I don't know about what's going on, or I don't know about my job, or I don't know about my girlfriend. And who can you talk to? Well, I can't talk to anyone about that because, I'm a man, and, they'll see me as weak or inferior, or, I'll be judged, or I'll be criticized, or oh, I don't know, I shouldn't do that, or I shouldn't say that. Well, no one's ever said that before. I would look weird if I did that, or, oh, just judging. And that's the default mode network, the controller and the dictator coming back into play, creating too much order, too much rigidity. Need to learn, and I think using, having kind of like heroic dose psychedelic experiences in a ceremonial context in the proper set and setting with guides and in a responsible way can be a really great experience once every 3 months or 4 months or 5 months or something like that. But also in that in-between time, having daily practices of breathing exercises, simply breathing, simply taking in the breath. The breath is life. Just allowing a deep breath to fill your lungs and then breathe out. Do it fast, do it slow, however you want to do it. Just setting aside some time to close yourself down, to shut yourself down, and to just soak it all in and just be. And you don't have to do it perfectly. But having a daily practice like that sets the reminder in your brain every day, every single day. So you don't, float too far off into space without a cord attached. So, this is these are some of the things that I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about this community, the need for community, the how backwards we have everything here in the West, and how people but are feeling bad because they don't feel like they fit in, because we're living in this world that's really not conducive to fulfilling our deepest human desires. And I think that the more separated that we become, the more disconnected that we become, the easier it is for other people to come in there and say, hey, I got it. I'll take care of you. And the more likely you are to say, yes, please. Yes, please take care of me. Please. I mean, just look at some of the systematic, racism that is inherent in some of the government programs that exist, like public housing and welfare and these sorts of things. Essentially keeping people in this cycle that their entire reality tunnel, their entire vision of the world is out of this position of being in this, generation after generation of living in terms of these game rules that have been set up for them, and have been set up for them, like I said, for a reason: to keep them dependent, not to help them, to keep them inferior, to keep them, like an Oedipal mother. The state is the ultimate. It's that we live in the ultimate nanny state with the ultimate Oedipal mother. So I've been thinking a lot about community. We need more community. We need more, the more community that we have, the more individual personal responsibility people take on. I mean, it's just because you don't want to let your fellow community members down. You want to show up for them because they're going to show up for you, and they have shown up for you. And that's what I've experienced. And really, a lot of this stuff, I remember being at the temple, and I always hear people asking questions about, oh, can we do this, or is this allowed, or can we do that? And the general idea when you're living in a place down when you're living in a tribal sort of Aboriginal native way, in a hunter-gatherer sort of tribal way, the main rule really is one of respect. If you're doing things with respect, there aren't these overarching general TSA type of nanny state rules. I mean, fucking goddamn it. I mean, it's just just coming back into the States with the fucking TSA and like how many times my bag got searched and patted down. I mean, it's just absolute. I mean, it's just such a violation, just such a annoyance. It's an annoyance that human beings have been reduced to this kind of pitter patter of like, oh, go here, sir. Here's a line. Oh, no, you need that stamp, sir. Your bag, sir. Are there any liquids in there, sir? Are there any liquids in there, sir? Sir, I'm going to please take your laptop out, sir. It's secure. I mean, it's fucking security theater. They haven't thwarted one terrorist attack. All they do is steal people's iPads. They're a bunch of, it's just an illusion to make you feel a certain level of safety. If you have to take your shoes off and your belts off and all that stuff, most people feel, oh well, I'd rather do that than have someone sneak a bomb on or something. I'd rather have my freedom intact. I'd rather ride the tempestuous sea of liberty than be, fucking living in a timid, fearful way. It's a Thomas Jefferson quote. I forget. He said, "Timid men prefer the comforts of tyranny as opposed to the tempestuous sea of liberty." And yeah, that's what it is. I mean, it's ultimately, do you prefer comfort that's gonna kill you? Eventually, you're just gonna like die in like a hospital bed, like, oh, like fucking. I wish I didn't eat so many ham and cheese sandwiches. Or you're gonna live a life that's like really truly like out there in the real world, like with real people, like connecting your heart and your soul to others, exchanging your language with theirs, exchanging your ideas with theirs, building upon, exchanging these puzzle pieces and then building on them to create new things. And when I mean create new things, I don't mean create a better app. I don't mean create a fucking like, oh, well, now Amazon's introducing drones, so you can, this whole idea of like progress, that we're making things that actually increase the level of efficiency for like deliveries and, emails and like all this shit. It's just like, we're making ways to make us more productive at work. And the entire idea of like integrating back into this world after having a profound psychedelic experience, I sort of fundamentally disagree with, I have to be honest. And this is the thing that I've been thinking about a lot. It's like, this idea of integration to bring what you've learned from the experience that you've had in the profound psychedelic experiences that people have, to bring that back and to plug back into this world. It sort of seems crazy to me. I mean, it's like trying to reform the mafia. It's like, well, I'm a good person, and I'm gonna, I went on vacation, I learned some things, and now I'm gonna come back, and I'm still gonna go back into the mafia gang that I belong to, and maybe I can convince them to get out of prostitution, sex trafficking, and drug racketeering, and all these things, and maybe I can convince them to not be so violent to people. It's like, no, that's the nature of the system. I mean, sure, there's outliers. There's always outliers. But I think integration, the integration that needs to be happening, is a fundamental change to the paradigm that we're currently existing in. A fundamental change. That's twice now I've used paradigm on this show. I don't know why paradigm gets such a bad name. I mean, it sounds like a perfect word to use. It means the overarching sort of system of values and beliefs and morals of the current zeitgeist of the times, so to speak, if you will. If you'll indulge me for my my pretentious vocabulary. But this is the sort of system that we're just sort of like going along with. We're allowing this to happen. People wonder, oh, how did Trump happen, or how did this happen, or whatever, this and that. It's because we allow it. We allow it. We allow it to happen because we're not prepared to take the steps necessary in order to take a stand to say no. People are like, well, I really don't like it, but they still plug back in. They still use all the social media apps on their phones. They still, and I know how hard it is, because when I came back, I dove fully in. I got into vicious bridge troll Twitter arguments and Facebook arguments and things like this, and I felt the energy of me changing and shifting and the tension coming back, and I was like, oh no, I don't want this. I want where I was before, and I consciously made the effort to do that. Because as Christopher Ryan says, when you have knowledge of both worlds, when you have knowledge of the world of the Western civilization that we live in today and the world of the hunter-gatherer style civilization, when you have knowledge of those both worlds, people never choose the modern society. Sure, there might be people that desire that because they don't know what it's like. From an outside looking in, you see a world with like shiny, fast cars and all this cool stuff and television and screens, and it looks magical and wonderful and cool and weird, but ultimately it's not soul nourishing. This is not a soul nourishing mainstream world that we have here that's really it's really killing us and causing us to have a lot of problems. And so when people talk about psychedelics as being a potential help for depression and anxiety and all these things, yes, but then to just continue living in this world that we've created here, I say no. I say we need a radical transformation in order to, one of my biggest problems with like microdosing, I mean, I'm not against microdosing whatsoever. I've microdosed myself, but I make the argument that microdosing is a good way to use psychedelics. I mean, it's a good way to sort of like have a little bit more clarity and have a little bit more uplifted spirit. I mean, it can be for some people, but also it keeps you in the game. It keeps you in the system. Like we're not supposed to be taking psychedelics so we can be more efficient workers, and these sorts of things. We need to totally break the entire structure that we currently exist in. Is how I feel. When people are able to have profound experiences that take them out of their body and connect them deep into their soul, into their truth, they no longer have the easily accessible buttons that are so so easily pushed by the manipulators, the trendsetters, the consumption creators. They're those things are harder to manipulate because we've deconditioned ourselves from this world that's trying to make us fit into something that we don't necessarily need, but plays on our desires to want it, to say, ooh, I maybe I do want that, or maybe I should get that, or ooh, that looks good. That burger looks good. Ooh, they got the new cell phone out now. That looks exciting. So this is one of the things that I've been thinking about, and another thing I've been thinking about is this idea of like the self like improvement sort of like fad. That's I don't know if it's a fad, but it just seems like everywhere I look on Instagram and everywhere else, everyone's podcast, every article just seems like 10 ways to start your morning off right, or like 6 killer ab workouts, or like don't eat bread anymore because you're gonna be fat and ugly and no one's gonna like you, and all this just everything. It's just like I read this amazing article in the New Yorker, and I forget who talked about it, or who wrote it, but it was called "Improving Ourselves to Death." And it's this whole idea that like there's something wrong with us. We got to be perfect. And again, this goes back to the idea that we're living in this society that's forcing us to have all these sorts of insecurities and these deficiencies so we can plug the hole with like self-help books and courses and programs. And again, just, I'm not saying that all of these things are bad. I'm just saying that there's an epidemic in America that is just like, you're not good enough. You need to be doing more. You need to be better. You need to be making more money. You need to be driving a better car. You need to be, you need to be looking better. You need to be thinner. You need to be healthier. You're not healthy enough. You need to relax. You need to drink more. You need to you got to watch this show. You got to watch that show. You got to subscribe to this thing. You got to, it's just from an endless amount of like things that people, I think it's just this madness that's getting created out of the fact that we're constantly trying to plug these holes and to fill these voids. But really, the real voids and the real holes come from us not having this connection that we have with ourselves at a deep level, and being generally content and satisfied with just being here right now in this moment with the people that are right around us. If you're listening to this and there's people around you, just pause this and just look at them, talk to them. Just, don't look at your cell phone while you're having a conversation with someone. Just be there with them. Don't look at like Twitter and don't watch the news. Don't check the news for like a week. Delete all your social media apps off your phone. Put it away. Just try it for like 3 days and see how you feel. Just try not knowing what's happening in the world, but totally know what's happening in your world. What's the real news story of the day in your world? What are the real important things that you need to know in your world, in your life? What matters to you? What are the moments that matter to you? That is really the key here, and I hope I can make this clear. It's like we live in this society in the West that is constantly trying to take you out of the picture. It's not about you. It's about this image of you, this image or this idea to strive for, this impossible striving for thing. But really, it's, we are all that matter. Like us living our lives here, like that's the real deal here. And it just feels so nice when you're around somebody that you want to just be with that person, and you don't need to be constantly, plugged in like an umbilical cord to like this internet of just unstoppable information that it's impossible to process. It's impossible to know every single thing. Do you know how many articles I have saved to read later? I probably have 1,000 articles saved to read later. Oh, that looks interesting. I can't read it now. I'll just save to read it later. I'm never going to read them. We don't need to know all these things. We don't need to be plugged into all this stuff. Yet there's this desire that we feel like we do, and it's like, oh yeah, we need. Well, that would be interesting. Well, maybe I'll get around to do it, or feeling bad or feeling shame that we're not able to get around to the things that we want to get around to or do. What's the rush? There's no rush. There's no competition. There's no rush. We live in one of the most comfortable, prosperous times in all of history, where all of our needs are all of our basic needs are met. Yet we're creating all this excessive drama for no reason whatsoever. Or at least we're allowing other people to exact it upon us. There's a lot of problems, that I sense, and because of those problems that I sense, I feel like, where do I fit? Where do I fit? It's hard for me to plug in. It's hard for me to join. And I just have an opinion about everything. So, it's hard for me to go along with the general consensus of what reality is when I'm around people who don't think this way, or who look at you in a strange way when you bring things up like this because they're not really prepared to go there. They're not. They haven't recognized that there's more to this reality than what they've been told and what they've been sold. And when you're talking to somebody like that, it's like there's a person there, but they're not really there. So you have this sort of like fake interaction with them because that's all that they can handle. And, it's not necessarily their fault. We should have compassion for them. Compassion that it's like, look, you've been indoctrinated into a system that makes you a slave. I mean, that essentially is it. I mean, we all are slaves. We're not free people. We're slaves that live in like a nice prison. There's this great, I think it's Robert Nozick, The Tale of the Slave. It's like a thought experiment. I think he was a Harvard professor. And he talks about this thought experiment called The Tale of the Slave. He says, okay, there's like 10 stages, I think, or 8 stages, something like that. He says, in the first stage, you're a slave, and you have a master who just abuses you on a whim, whenever he, like, arbitrarily just beats the shit out of you. Okay, so that's your living condition. Then in the second stage, the beatings are purposeful. It's not just arbitrary whenever he wants. So it's you would say, hey, that's a little bit better, right? So he only beats you if you dropped a glass and broke it or something like that. But you're still a slave, still get beat, still get punished. Then the third stage is, okay, there's no more beatings, but there's punishments, or there's reprimandings. You're still a slave, you're still living under these conditions. Then like the fourth stage, he says that like you're still as a slave, and you're with other people, and you're in a group, and everybody in the group gets to decide, the master decides like how everything is rationed out, like who gets what food and how much and all this kind of stuff. Okay, then the next step, you get 2 days off now. So now you're still a slave, but you get 2 days off, and on those 2 days off, you can relax, at your slave compound, your plantation, wherever you are, and you don't have to do any work, you don't have to do any chores, but you have those 2 days off, so you can, you could just relax, or you could spend time with your family or whatever, but you still have to stay on the premises. Then the fifth or sixth stage, I forgot what I was up to now. They say that you get those 2 days off, and you can go into town and you can buy things, or I guess you don't have any money to buy things, but you can go into town and you can just walk around and go to a lake or whatever the hell. You're free on those 2 days, but you have to come back. Then the sixth or seventh stage is you're still a slave, but now, instead of having to work on the plantation that you're slaving at, you get to choose to work somewhere, anywhere in the town, and you get to make money. And you still have those 2 days off, but the only fact is that because your master essentially, quote unquote, freed you to work, to have a choice to work anywhere, you owe him a certain percentage. So you owe him like 30% or 40% of your income, whatever you make, has to go back to him. So you agree to that, and you go back to that. And then in the last stage, it's like people get the right to vote, but you don't have the right to vote. So everybody else can vote, and you can't, and they get to decide, like, the new rules and what happens and how much of your money gets taken out and given to the master and all this stuff. And so Nozick says at the end of this theory, he says, well, at what point between these stages, between 1 and 8, are you not a slave? Is this a story about anything else but a slave? So you see what I'm saying? In all of these stages, you're still a slave. We're still slaves. Slavery has not been abolished. It's been reorganized, and we live in this world right now that exists with like this as like a clown. It's a clown in clown makeup, and it's making balloons, and it's like, hey, America, how you doing? All right, everything's great, right? Yeah, look at us. We're cool, and we're friendly, and we're hip, and we're with it. But on the inside, it's going to eat you. It's going to drag you into a sewer, and it's going to eat you, like the clown from It. And clowns are fucking scary to begin with anyway, so the whole thing is creepy anyway. And most people, the majority of people are like, hey, all right, we're slaves. But at least we're not getting beaten. Okay. But you're not free. And so this has a ripple effect down to everything, right? This hierarchy that we live under, this oppressive sort of like state-run rule with the these people, they're doing things in our name. That's what we have to remember, is these elected officials, these people that we have in positions of power are doing things that represent us. When we go, when other countries look at America, when they think of us, they think of pretty much our government, because our government acts on our behalf. So if you don't consent to that, let it be known. Let it be known, because things don't change by not taking action. Things don't change by just saying like, well, I wish it was different, but it's not. And well, someone will do it, but not me. Well, it's like, no, I mean, how do you fight the galactic evil empire? Hopefully, there's a little bit of a weakness in the Death Star. Hopefully, that would be the case. But ultimately, what I'm getting at here is, aside from, they call the work with ayahuasca medicine. And it is medicine. It's medicine to help us stop from going fucking crazy. If we don't interact with psychedelics, if we don't alter our state of consciousness, if we don't have the right to choose to alter our state of consciousness, let me rephrase that. If we're not afforded the right, we don't live in a wise society of elders ushering in the young and creative minds to thrive in a world that's unbounded and limitless, open to seize and on their potential to create greatness. We live in a world that pushes people through a meat grinder, and most of the people just are like shards that shoot out of the sides. But some of the people grind through. But what kind of lives are they living? What is the quality of their lives? Were they happy to mow their lawn on a Saturday because they got a new lawnmower? That's the excitement that you have in your life now? Where's the passion? Where's the fun? Where's the childlike wonder and curiosity? That's what living is all about. And I think most people are so fucking dead inside that they lost connection with all that stuff they didn't even realize that they had. They just thought, oh, well, this is just what it's like. It's not what it's like. There's multiple doors to be opened. There's multiple rooms to be explored. Modern society has gravely disrupted the social bonds that have always categorized the human experience. This is something that I've been reading. I've been reading a lot about in Sebastian Junger's book Tribe, which I recently read. This book by Robert Nisbet, The Quest for Community. Carl Jung, his book The Undiscovered Self, the dilemma of the individual in modern society, where he talks about the relationship, the comparison between the state and the church. The state is the church now. We worship it. We worship it. We participate in its rituals. We participate in its religious fervor. The NFL recently said that it's going to fine the teams for players that are kneeling during the national anthem. And if people wonder why, it's because the United States military pays the NFL to promote jingoism and propaganda. I mean, to promote these, to make sure that we keep these wars going overseas, because they make a lot of people a lot of money. to make sure that people to make sure that we live in a climate of war and a culture of war and a culture of violence that has school shootings and that has, deadly overseas bombings and invasions of countries and occupations and the slaughter of innocents and all this sorts of things. Make sure that we still have that going, because that's making a lot of people a lot of money. The defense contractors and the war profiteers and the pill pushers, the people that are prescribing all these pills, and the insurance companies and the doctors and the banks and the credit cards. And I mean, this whole fucking thing is a racket. It's a racket. And it's like, fuck, is there a way out? Like, it's scary to think that, and I think a lot of times the psychedelic experience can really, people say they had a bad trip or a bad experience. A lot of times what happens is you're so jolted out of this reality, and now all of a sudden you have these unconventional thoughts that like, oh yeah, like this isn't the only way, and like, holy shit, like what Terrence McKenna says in the beginning of the show, like everything that you've ever been told is a lie. Like, you look around your environment and you're like, this is all built on lies. I've been lied to my whole life, and I've been kept out of the real thing. They've kept the real thing from me because they don't want you to be an individual. They don't want to empower you to be a responsible individual that has common sense, decency, and respect, that can come together and talk in a coherent way and make agreements, voluntary agreements with your fellow man. But that's how people have always organized for thousands of years. It isn't until we've gotten into this sedentary state where we have this abundance of things that we have to create all these problems for ourselves, that we have people ruling over us, telling us how things are or how reality is. That's their version of reality. They're setting the tone. We don't have to accept that. But it takes minor changes. It takes these little changes, right? It takes these little things. And so this has been what's on my mind. This has been what I'm going through. I still am hesitant to release this podcast because I don't feel like it's up to par. I don't feel confident in it. I don't feel like it's my best. I feel it's a little scattered, a little all over the place. I don't feel good about it. I don't feel like I'm back to my old self yet. But you know what? I think I'm just going to get it out there and let me know what you guys think. I want to make sure that I'm putting out quality content. And, I think this podcast is a reflection of just some of the things that I'm going through and some of the things that I'm seeing as I enter back into the world, coming from living in the jungle for this long period of time, living in community and working with in a sacred context. That was another thing that I wanted to bring up. I was reading Shamanism by Mircea Eliade, and he talks about this notion of the sacred and the profane, these sacred spaces that we don't have anymore. Like our communities, our society, our civilization at large doesn't create spaces for sacredness. And this isn't some woo-woo like hippie, stuff. This is the reality of what the human being needs. The human being needs time and space. And we don't need to be rushed on this treadmill to try and do all these things that we don't want to do just so we can pay for this existence that we don't want to have. We can do better. And I hope to do better. I hope to produce better podcasts. I hope to read more and come up with a more streamlined and coherent theory for a lot of the things that I want to talk about. I plan on writing a book, and the thesis of that book is going to be about a lot of the things that I'm sort of fleshing out in this podcast, and a lot of the things that I've been talking about. And I really truly deeply believe that that coming together in communities, empowering individuals to take responsibility, encouraging sacred spaces, and working with profound spiritual elements that produce altered states of consciousness in order to have fun, in order to look at life in a more lighter way, is why we are here on this planet. We're not here on this planet so we can build, the biggest rocket ship to fly to Saturn, to see what kind of gas they have there. We haven't even gone inwards in ourselves yet. We can't even come together as a species yet. There's this great like story. There's a great story that I'm trying to think of what it was. I watched it during a Wim Hof breathing course, and he tells about these wizards that are getting together to create the universe, and they're putting all these things in all these places, and then they say, now what to do with the soul? What to do with the soul of man? What should we do with the soul of man? Where should we put that? And one of them says, oh, I know, we should just put it, let's put it on top of a mountain. That'll be a good place to put it. And he says, no, because the man, they invent, this gear and this equipment, and they'll put on all these snowshoes and these hooks and these things, and they'll climb to the top of the mountain, and they'll find it, and they'll put it in a museum, and they'll say, look at what I've got, look what I found. Okay, what if we put it and we hide it at the bottom of the ocean? What about that? No, they'll invent something, and they'll travel down there, and they'll get it, and they'll bring it back, and they'll show it to all their friends, and they'll be on every TV station, and they'll say, look at what we have, we found this thing, look at it, it's blah blah blah. Okay, what if we hide it out in space? It's like, no, they're adventurers, they're explorers, they're curious. They'll build something. They'll build a rocket ship. They'll fly out there. They'll find it. They'll get it. They'll bring it back. And what can we do? Where are we going to put this thing? And one of them has an idea, and he says, I know. What if we hide it in man himself? Because that's the one place he never looks. Yeah, all this exterior progress, all this exterior outward exploration of extrinsic values that we think that are so important to us. All these measurements of success and progress that we have. Well, we have we have iPhones now, so clearly, we live in a better time than, the Aboriginal hunter-gatherers did. Do we? Well, yeah, sure, because they died at 35. Did they? Well, yeah, there was all kinds of diseases and illnesses, and, people got sick, and, it was terrible, it was horrible. Was it? Or is that the story we're being told, so that the government and the positions of authority in our society that hold the strings together, that form the fabric of what the culture is, are we being told that so that we say to them, well, thank you for keeping everything together, because without you, we'd be, sick and dead at 35, and we would have illnesses and all this terrible stuff. I don't, I'm not saying that we should just burn down civilization and start living in loincloths and not worry about getting sick. What I'm saying is, we've come this way. We have this stuff now. The choice is on us. Human beings are very adaptable. In the book Born to Run, Christopher McDougall talks about how human beings have evolved to run barefoot, and how the shoe industry is a racket. Nike selling sneakers with air in them and all this kind of stuff. It's all a fucking racket that came into invention in the 70s as a way to make money. I mean, and look at the sneaker industry now. It's insane. But human beings were evolved to just run barefoot. And for hundreds of miles, human beings can sweat. So that's the way that we cool ourselves down. And we've evolved to run down animals, because they, like an antelope, a pack of human beings would just run it down to death. So we'd be able to sweat and cool ourselves off, and they wouldn't be able to. So when the animal stopped to try and catch its breath, we'd kill it, and then we'd have dinner. And that's how we evolved. But where's that story? You don't hear that. No one's telling you that, because the shoe companies have a vested interest. Because everybody has a vested interest in keeping the story the way that it is. But also my point is that we wear shoes now. And so we've adapted to that. And we can adapt. We're adaptable. We can adapt to changing conditions. That's the main function of what contributes to a human being's success is our adaptability. But it's like, what do we want? Do we want to adapt to this virtual reality technological world? Because we can adapt to it, but do we want to adapt to it is the real choice. All right, this episode has been about an hour and a half now, and once again, I just want to thank everybody for listening and for really, for getting through this episode with me. And it feels good to be back. I still feel a little unbalanced. I still feel a little shaken by, coming back into this environment and sort of, trying to integrate fully from the experience that I had there and really try and take the lessons and remember the profound insights and remember the feelings and remember the level of contentment and happiness and connection that I felt there and try and implement it into this world that is so trying to suppress all of that and keep you against it. So it's up to me to seek it out and to find it. And that's what I will be doing. So to give you a little bit of an update of what will be happening, I might be heading back to Peru. I might not. I might potentially be doing something with the temple, with podcasting. Maybe that might happen. So we'll see. If that doesn't happen, I plan on doing a little bit of traveling. And really what I want to do is I just want to travel around all over, no matter where. And I want to talk to interesting people. And I want to, I want to document my experience as well as I'm traveling, what I'm seeing, what I'm learning, and these sorts of things. And so, I want to come to a community near you and connect with like-minded people, and have discussions about these things, and have talks, about them. And one of the other things that I want to do is really starting to formulate more and more of a solid core thesis for this whole podcast. Really, all the solo shows that I do, talking about these things that I feel so passionately about, that I feel very I feel are very important topics to discuss. I really want to solidify my arguments a lot more, and I really want to come up with some better, I don't know, more of a cohesive argument, I would say, or cohesive theory. But that's going to take a lot of time. That's going to take some planning and some things like that. But that's what's on the way. That's what's cooking up. And so I'm sorry if you guys wanted to hear my ayahuasca accounts and the visions I had and the ceremonies I had and all that stuff. Maybe I'll tell those tales one day, but for now, you're getting what my perspective is on life. Well, this has been Mycadelic. You have been listening to a Mycadelic podcast. Thanks for joining. See you next time. Peace.